Hi everyone. So this video is about kind of two things. I guess the title of it is Your Body is Always Listening and Self-Compassion, which are tied together. And I want to talk about that because I had a conversation a while back with someone who recovered. She had a longer recovery, but I asked her just in a text message, what is the one thing that helped you the most through your recovery journey? And she actually said self-compassion, which I really liked, because again, as in my interview with Michelle that I recently did, she talks so much about acknowledging symptoms like, hey, you're here with me right now, and then making the choice to move forward. And it's kind of that, like, it is a part of self-compassion. So I'm feeling this, it sucks, but kind of treating yourself kindly in those moments and deeply allowing the symptoms to be there and treating it more broadly, sort of as nervous system dysregulation, as opposed to freaking out about what's happening in your brain, and then moving forward with your day, whether you have a schedule already created or whatever it might look like. And I think that's really important, because if you get into subconscious work, law of attraction, energy work, all of these different things, maybe you've looked into that, maybe you haven't, they talk so much about how the body is always listening, and what we tell it and the thoughts that we think deeply impact our physiology. And I've always been a very intuitive person, a very energetic person, if you will. Way before I ever took psychiatric drugs, I used to have like visions and premonitions, and I was always very deeply in tune with sort of the spiritual part of myself. And although I've been a highly critical person, very type A, hard on myself, I was very connected spiritually. And then when I was on psychiatric drugs and in withdrawal, I lost a lot of that connection, both to spirituality outside of myself, like my faith in God or a God, but also my intuition. And I see this a lot with people, but the more that you can move through this experience with self-compassion, and how you would, there's that saying sort of in psychology, say to yourself what you would say to your best friend. I know that doesn't happen a lot, because over and over again in my conversations with people when I'm coaching them is, how could I be so stupid? And why am I so weak? People will look at so many of these things as character flaws, their symptoms. And I'll say, well, first of all, you were having real symptoms. And, there's the acute phase, which is very chemical, and a lot of different methods or alternatives don't really have much of an impact. But once you move more outside of the acute phase, I think all of these other things are really important to integrate. So you can watch my video with Michelle where she talks about different nervous system regulation techniques, but also self-compassion. Does this change your symptoms in the moment? No, but you're trying to change your relationship to the symptoms, which in turn lowers your fear and lowers that nervous system response, which is what you want. And I want to talk to you about how the body is listening. And this could be completely coincidental. You could think that I'm a complete wacko for saying this, but because again of my highly intuitive nature and the way that I have started to sort of study and learn about the body because of my withdrawal experience and how there's so many aspects to health outside of just biology, I just want to share this with you. So my daughter, she is 3.5 years old. Today is October 23rd. So it'll be 2 weeks ago tomorrow. So on October 10th, she started to get sick, and it progressed. Like it was coming out of both ends. She had a fever. She had a barking cough, really runny, like tons of mucus, congestion. She was very lethargic. She looked awful. She was losing weight. She was barely eating. And it obviously, as a mom and as someone who is, has had a lot of health issues myself, it became alarming to me, obviously. And so she was taken to the doctor, and they did a bunch of tests, and I, of course, was not satisfied. And I was like, more needs to be done. But it was a Friday when this happened, when she was taken to the doctor. And I was like, I was having a conversation with my mom. Should I take her to the hospital? I feel like she needs antibiotics. Like, she was just burning up. Like, I have a forehead thermometer, and it was showing that it was high, and it was going on way too long, and she wouldn't take any. Like, I'm I try to be mindful about all medications, but I just try to give her Tylenol. She was throwing it up. And so that night when I was in a stress state because I was worried about my daughter, but also didn't want to spend hours and hours in the ER. I mean, obviously I would if necessary, but I said to myself, I'm like, I'm going to take a different approach. Again, just learning everything I've learned about health, the body, and just because I feel so much like myself lately, that intuitive sort of energetic nature is and has been returning for me. So I put her to bed. She fell asleep really early because she was sleeping all the time. And I held her hand, and I get these weird, like, downloads, if you will. It's like, it's hard to describe. It's very intuitive. And so I held her hand, and I was staring at her, and I had this feeling of power. I almost like alluded to if you were watching cartoons and someone has like laser beams coming out of their eyes. That's how I felt when I was like holding her hand and watching her sleep. I like just had this, I felt like I had this strength within me, this power, which is how I get when I get into this intuitive thing. And I held her hand and I was like, okay, I was speaking to her body. I was like, okay, we're done now. We're done with the fever. You're healthy again. And I was trying to, I could feel it. Like I was sending her like healing power through the hand. And again, this might be totally out in left field for you, and that's okay, but I just want to share this. And I was speaking to her body through my own body. And I was just in a very calm, very regulated place and just in this state of power, if you will. And I kid you not, woke up the next day, fever was gone. She was still coughing, but something just clicked. And I felt this, I had this feeling like, okay, something shifted. And just the night before, she was in such a bad place with fever and symptoms and weight loss and was getting rings around her eyes that I was like, she's worse than ever. And it's a week into this. And I felt like the doctors weren't doing enough. And I was debating taking her to the ER. So fever was gone. She was still coughing, but something was shifting. And then just within that whole day, she started eating again. The cough started, like I could hear it breaking up. And by the next day, she was better. And again, could be a total coincidence, but I do think that there's energy all around us, and the mind is very powerful. The body is very in tune with nature. And I don't want to go too far with this, maybe if it's sounding kind of crazy to you, but also it's a very, I guess, important part of my story and this message, which is just be mindful of how you speak to yourself. And this is a process. If you've been someone who's always been very hard on yourself, like me, overachieving, type A, kind of like to be in control, this process really kind of forces you into different ways of being in a lot of ways. And so I've learned to be more self-compassionate and more, trying to think in broader terms. I just had a conversation with someone about, sorry, there's a fly right by my face, thinking in broad terms, because again, when you're in withdrawal and your mind, especially when you're in a wave, is latching on to things like left, right, and center, and it just gets into that over-analyzing, looping mode. You have to force it to start to see things more broadly. Like, again, like my conversation with Michelle, this is dysfunction, it's dysregulation. Instead of just honing in on, is this akathisia, is this, what does this mean? Just, okay, something has dysregulated me. Something has added to the stressors, and they've just piled up a little bit. So now it's going to take some time and some regulation to bring it back down again to more of a baseline. And again, when you're in acute, there's not much that you can do. A lot of the times you're distracting, you are gathering support, and that's it. But after a while, when things start to break up a little bit, this is when this other stuff becomes much more powerful, in my experience. And so self-compassion and realizing, I guess, the whole nature of the being, so to speak, and what contributes to, because, I feel like a main agreement that people have in this community is that we hate the chemical imbalance theory. We hate that when someone is presenting as depressed, doctors just say your brain is chemically imbalanced, you need drugs. Because we're like, that's just a marketing ploy to sell these drugs. It's not true. Depression, there's much more to it. There's lifestyle factors, environment, grief, stressors, toxic relationships, inflammation, all these different, like it's biopsychosocial is what we're saying. And so I've come to see withdrawal and like especially past acute withdrawal and health in general after the withdrawal experience as much more holistic than that. So the more the more that we can take care of all of the aspects, biologically, by eating clean and exercising when we can, and also socially, getting positive social support, because I've seen it again and again. When people feel safe, they're around safe people, they can co-regulate, their symptoms go down. When they're in safer environments, when they go on vacation, when they're around people, that they feel comfortable with, symptoms come down. That's how it was with me and my grandma. The spiritual side, I talk a lot on this channel about Alcoholics Anonymous, or maybe not a lot, but I have, and how they don't focus on everything you've done to destroy your body with alcohol. They focus on how do we take care of our life from here. And I want to start thinking, or I tend to think of this whole experience more from that aspect. Once you move out of acute, the more areas that you can take care of, the better. It just bolsters your health. And again, we're not looking at, or we say that chemical imbalance is not the theory of depression. It's multifaceted. To potentially think of withdrawal outside of acute, which very much is chemical, as similar. The more aspects of your health you can take care of, the better. That's just how I see it, and I just wanted to share this. Be compassionate with yourself. It's okay to be angry, like I talked about in my anger video, but how do we move past that? How do we forgive ourselves, forgive the other people, not for the sake of letting them off the hook, because they didn't provide us informed consent, but do it for our own health and well-being. So I just want to leave you guys with that. Try and take one step every day to notice how you're talking to yourself, and just develop that self-compassion a little bit more each day. Talk to yourself like you would a best friend, and just start to see the experience in general. I'm dysregulated. These symptoms aren't inherently dangerous. I don't need to analyze, what does this mean? I'm feeling this. Is it this? Because the A word a lot of people are scared of. Is it this? Is it DPDR? Is it depression? Or is it, there's so much arbitrary labeling in psychiatry with a lot of overlap. And instead of attaching meaning to all of these things, just start to see it more broad. It takes the stress load off just a little bit, and it just eases some of that, because you just so quickly spiral when you start to get into analyzing mode. So I just want to share that with you guys. Just being more mindful, and just treating yourself with the care and compassion that you deserve. You've been isolated, gaslit enough, and finding that support is helpful within the community and just in your real life, but also in how you support yourself. So I just wanted to say that. Take care, you guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.